While Europe was grappling with the infamous Black Death, a more subtle yet equally terrifying specter loomed over the New World, a disease as deadly and merciless as any tyrant, silently preying on the unsuspecting souls who dared to dream of a new life in the colonies of America. It was a time when the New World held the promise of a fresh start, a land of opportunity where settlers from Europe flocked to escape persecution and build a better future. But what they found was a nightmare straight out of their nightmares. Before we dive into today's gripping tale, we kindly ask for your support. If you find our videos valuable and would like to contribute to our production, please consider becoming a patron through the provided means. Your support will help us continue bringing these historical tales to life. As the Mayflower Pilgrims sought refuge in the New England wilderness and the Spanish conquistadors roamed the Aztec heartland, both groups unknowingly carried with them the seeds of destruction. Smallpox, measles, and typhus, diseases that had ravaged Europe for centuries, found fertile ground in the crowded ships that transported these settlers across the Atlantic. By the end of the 17th century, it was estimated that these diseases had claimed over 20 million lives in the Americas, a staggering mortality rate that left indigenous populations decimated and entire settlements wiped off the map. The arrival of Europeans in the Americas marked the beginning of a tragic chapter in history, a period known as the Columbian Exchange. During this time, there was a massive transfer of plants, animals, and most ominously, diseases between the Old World and the New World. And as the two worlds collided, so did the pathogens that had remained isolated for millennia. One of the most notorious examples of this grim exchange was the introduction of smallpox to the Americas. When the Spanish conquistadors arrived in the Aztec Empire in the 16th century, they unknowingly brought with them a virus that would prove more lethal than any weapon in their arsenal. Smallpox ravaged the indigenous populations who had no immunity against the disease. Entire villages were wiped out, leaving behind desolate streets and silent fields where life had once thrived. The survivors were left to bury their loved ones and wonder why such a cruel fate had befallen them. Another devastating outbreak occurred in the New England colony of Boston in 1633, with a population of around 2,000. Boston was a bustling hub of trade and settlement. But all that came to a screeching halt when a merchant ship arrived carrying a deadly cargo, not of goods, but of disease. The ship's crew was stricken with bubonic plague, a horrifying illness that would soon lay siege to the colony. As the plague took hold, panic and despair gripped the town. People were dying at a rate of 100 per week, and the once vibrant streets became eerie and empty. The authorities struggled to contain the outbreak, resorting to desperate measures such as closing businesses and banning public gatherings. But nothing could stop the relentless plague. It spread like wildfire, sparing none in its path. Gravediggers worked tirelessly, day and night, to bury the dead, their shovels hitting the cold Boston soil with a sickening thud. The air grew thick with the stench of death and decay as the plague continued its merciless rampage. Homes, once filled with laughter and warmth, became haunted houses of horror as families were torn apart by the disease. The sight of children left orphaned and wandering the streets became a heartbreaking common occurrence. In the midst of this chaos and despair, rumors and superstitions began to take root. People turned to the clergy for answers and solace, but even the church had no explanation for this terrible scourge. Some whispered that the plague was God's punishment for the sins of man. Others blamed the newcomers from Europe, believing they had brought this curse upon the land. Fear and paranoia gripped the community as they grappled with the idea that one wrong move could bring the wrath of the disease upon them. As the plague finally began to subside, Boston was left a shadow of its former self. The streets were littered with the belongings of those who had died, abandoned in their haste to flee or in the chilling grip of the disease. The economy was in ruins, trade routes disrupted, and the population decimated. The survivors emerged from their hiding places, gaunt and traumatized, forever marked by the horrors they had witnessed. They began the arduous task of rebuilding their lives and their community, but the scars of the plague ran deep. In the aftermath of the plague, profound changes swept through Boston and the wider colonial population. The outbreak exposed the fragility of life and the inadequacy of their defenses against such scourges. In response, settlers began to take more drastic measures to protect themselves, such as establishing quarantine zones and enforcing strict sanitary practices. These measures, while harsh and sometimes controversial, reflected the colonists' newfound determination to safeguard their health and well-being. The once romanticized wilderness now seemed to hold both beauty and danger. The settlers realized that they were not immune to the forces of nature, and that diseases could emerge from the very environment they sought to conquer. This realization led to a more cautious and respectful approach to their surroundings, as they learned to adapt and coexist with the challenges posed by the new world. As we conclude our journey through this dark chapter of history, let us remember those who suffered and perished during these plagues. Their stories serve as a reminder of the resilience of the human spirit in the face of unimaginable adversity. Let their legacy inspire us to cherish the gift of health, to honor the memories of those who have passed, and to strive for a world where such tragedies are never repeated.